16th meeting of the Mobile City Planning Commission, I would like to take a moment to review our general operating procedures. Our meeting is divided into two sessions, the public hearing session and the deliberation session. In the public hearing session, an application or group application on the agenda is called. The applicant makes his or her limited to 5 minutes, subject to questions by the commission. After 4 minutes, a loud beep will indicate 1 minute left to speak, and at this point, please summarize your comments. After all opposition speakers have finished, the applicant will be given time to respond. If you do intend to speak, please come to the podium, speak into the microphone, and give your name and address for our minutes. Please direct all comments to the commission only and not to the applicant or the audience, and please remember to speak directly into the microphone. On routine applications, the applicant may simply raise his or her hand if there are no objections to the staff recommendations. I will then announce that the applicant is in full agreement with those recommendations. If there are any questions, the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond. After hearing all applications, the commission will go into deliberation session. In the deliberation session, the commissioners discuss each application with input from the staff as necessary, but with no input from the audience. The commissioners then vote on each application, and the results of voting can be learned from the planning department. If some issue arises in the deliberation session that were not addressed in the public hearing, the chairman has the discretion either to allow additional comments pertaining to those issues in order to resolve them, or call for the application to be held over for discussion at a future meeting. Occasionally, one or more commission members may recuse themselves from discussing and voting on a given application. A recusal does not necessarily mean the member is directly involved with the application or the applicant. Depending upon the circumstances, ethical rules may require a recusal when there is only the slightest appearance of a conflict of interest. If a regular member recuses, a supernumerary will vote in their stead unless both supernumeraries are already voting due to absences. The Planning Commission makes final decisions subject to appeal on subdivisions, planning approvals, plan unit developments, PUDs. The Planning Commission only makes recommendations on zoning applications, with the City Council making the final decision. Please turn off and mute cell phones at this time. Commissioner and staff, please remember to turn on your microphone when speaking. Roll call. Ms. Libby Latham.
Here.
Ms. Jennifer Denson. Here. Mr. John Ballas.
Here.
Ms. Keena Andrews.
Here.
Mr. Don Hembry.
Here.
Mr. Alan Cameron.
Here.
And myself, we have a quorum. Now in our public session, starting with our holdovers, item number 1, northwest corner of Cypress Business Park and Shipyard Route, Bluffs of Cypress Creek Subdivision, Phase 2. Recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Yes. Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 2, 4658 and 4660 Airport Boulevard, Balloon Park Subdivision. Recommended for tentative approval.
Thank you. Recommended for approval, but really want to talk about two, really object to condition 1 of PUD, demolition of the inoperable car wash. Y'all remember there's a car wash on there that I'm showing 4 parking places in. Actually, that car wash, I went out to look at it a couple of days after the last meeting. It has recently been painted and it looks good. You may not like the color, but it looks good. There's no reason to tear it down. And actually, the person that really is trying to do this owns this front building. That's where he wants to put the lounge, the bar. And the person, different owner in the rear, is agreeable to let them use their existing parking area back there to accommodate overflow parking. I don't think he wants to tear that building down as part of this. It needs to stay there. Second thing is provision of photometric plans. Staff report said, well, it increased the parking more than 25%. We didn't really increase the parking. Parking lot, we're not building a parking lot. Parking lot's already there, but we are organizing that parking lot by putting stripes on it. So I really don't think photometric plan would be necessary to, as a condition in it, and that's number 2. But those 2 things are what we object to. Oh, and excuse me, by the way, have a letter. Last meeting, there was a gentleman on Airport Boulevard, 2 doors over, that was renovating his business and was concerned about it. He was misunderstanding where the project was going to be. He thought it was the large building in the back, and he objected. I have a copy of that letter where he has no objections at this time. I don't know if the staff was presenting one. I just got this today. That was Mr. Callagaz.
Any questions from commissioners?
Yeah, are lights part of this project? Like parking lot lights?
Wait a minute, ma'am?
Parking lot lighting, is it part of this project?
Yes, it's impervious. Go ahead.
Are you adding
yeah,
parking lot lighting?
No, we did not show that because it's all asphalt out there anyway. We're just putting stripes on the ground to organize the parking. Staff said that photometric was required because it was an increase of more than 25% parking.
Are you adding any new lights, though, to the parking lot?
No, we're not adding in.
Any comments from staff concerning that?
Mr. Byrd, I have some safety concerns about having a parking lot servicing an entertainment establishment with no lighting in the rear. The similar concerns that we had with the parking with the car wash being used for parking. It seems to me it's a real safety issue.
You know,
do you have any comments about that? I mean, I know that if I were...
Well, of course, we're interested in public, in the safety. Of course, you know, the city requirements is 1 space for every 100 square feet of what we're using. Don't really know that the occupancy will require that many parking places. But that's what city code says. I never have been out there at night.
I've driven
I don't know
by
whether
there
the
at
front
night.
of that large building is lit or not, which would be some there.
But if I were attending your establishment and had to, because it was successful, which is what everybody wants their business to be,
Yeah.
and had to park in the back of the parking lot behind the car wash to walk to the front of the area to attend the establishment, I'm pretty brave. I'm not.
I probably wouldn't go.
real sure
I'd probably turn
I would
around
be
and drive
comfortable
out.
doing that. And so I think it's certainly a safety concern, and you know, this is going outside the realm of our purview, but possibly a liability concern.
Ms. Latham, if I may point out, the zoning ordinance does state that a parking lot with 10 or more parking spaces must provide lighting during their hours of operation, but the photometric plan is only required if there is an expansion of 25% or redevelopment of the site. So the parking lot is supposed to be lit if it's going to be used at night, but the photometric plan is only going to be triggered as a requirement if there's an expansion in the number of parking spaces of 25% or more.
So it was y'all's interpretation of their plan that it was increasing by 25%?
Well, I think, you know, the previous PUD for the site did have parking in a lot of this area. I don't know that they ever actually came in and striped it. Now, I don't know if they're actually going to be adding more than 25% new striped spaces to what was already there. That might have been what the planner writing the report thought at the moment, but I'm not sure that that would actually be the case.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman.
So if we have parking lot lighting and parking spaces don't exceed 25% increase, and like I say, we're just organizing them with the stripes, if that's the case, to get the proper number. But if that's the case, we wouldn't have to have a photometric plan. But
Mr. Barry,
parking
currently,
lot lighting,
the parking
yes.
lot is not striped currently, correct?
Faint.
I mean,
Very
it shows
faint.
these as all new spaces in the back, where it
Yeah,
would be the
those
concern.
over by the car wash, I don't know if they're striped or not. I can't tell you right at the moment. The ones in front of that large building and the ones down the right-hand side for where the bar is going to be, those are striped. Right now, I can't tell you whether they're striped back there, ever have been striped, or if it's just a large asphalt area.
Yeah, my experience with being out there is that there is really, if there are stripes, they're very faint. So,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I mean, you're going from basically, zero parking spaces to however many you're putting on this application. So, to me, that seemed like you're organizing it, yes, and that's what we need, but it seemed like a pretty substantial increase in the number of parking spaces that we're going to dedicate as individual parking spaces.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners?
Question for our fire department, did we address the issue that we had last meeting regarding access around the large building in the back?
Yeah, they were able to provide 20-foot aisles.
Perfect, okay, great.
Anything else from commissioners? Anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. We'll- Item number 3, 4300 McLeod Lane, McLeod Family Subdivision. This application is recommended for denial.
Ronald McLeod, 4300 McLeod Lane. I have the documentation that was asked for last meeting. I wanted to submit it to y'all.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. McLeod was able to provide it right before the meeting. We told him we, of course, didn't have an opportunity to review it, but I believe he is agreeable to a holdover until the September 6th meeting. He would request that so it could be considered, so the staff would have an opportunity to look at it.
Hold on.
Are you agreeable to a holdover?
I am.
Is there anything, at that time, you'll get the opportunity to present your information as well to the commission. However, you do have that right to do so now if you want to.
Okay. This is 100% all blood relatives at this place, so that everyone knows. There is only one family that I have the sign from that's not a blood relative to me. That's the 865 Seaman Drive.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Anyone else here to speak for this, but you'll also have that opportunity at the September 6th meeting? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you, sir. We'll get it resolved. New subdivision applications. Item number 4, 820 Ingleside Drive West, Park Forest Estate Subdivision. Application recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations?
I think you guys sent me the wrong address because I'm on 821 Ingleside Drive West. This is you guys talking about 820 in Ingleside Drive. So probably that's a different address that I'm on the house.
Which is who's the applicant? Oh, he just received a notice. No, it wasn't, you just received a notice that we were reviewing their project.
Oh, I see.
Okay. But it's
Gotcha.
not, it doesn't apply to you unless you have a complaint.
Okay, I don't have any problem.
All right.
Thank you very much, everyone. Yeah, I am here with my wife, and in the year 2008, she became the best, what do we call it? The school, the Teacher of the Year award, and she asked me to build a sunroom for her in front of my house. And I said, I don't have the money, but when I get it, I'll go do it. We also agreed to put a garage behind. The garage was for putting her items, the items she had from the school. So we divided the garage into two, the front part for our vehicle, and the back side was to put her utilities and the teaching plans she had in her classes. So if you have a look at it, you will be able to see that the main house is protruding. By the time I was putting that protrusion, I had thought it was to have a margin of 25 feet from the walkway in front of our property. But I later realized that it was to beat the 30 feet mark from the front of the property. That's when I asked, what do I do? And they asked me to come and ask for that extension.
Is this your engineer here as well? Is your engineer here? Is that Mr. Ert?
Yes.
You may want to,
yeah.
maybe you can come help.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Vallis, I can explain. What had happened was that the applicant had obtained some permits to do some work on the house and to build a garage in the backyard. It was then realized that he had potentially been misinformed of his front setback as being allowed to be 25 feet, when in fact the recorded plat for this subdivision had a 35-foot front setback, and the addition on the front of his house is within the setback. So now he's amending the plat to have a standard 25-foot setback, which will be okay for the front addition.
That's all. He's getting a variance for the garage in the back.
He's okay with these two conditions? Obviously the setback is.
Yes.
Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 5, 9601 and 9675 Three Notch Corner Road, Downers Grove Subdivision, Unit 3, recommended for tentative approval. The applicant present. Are you in agreement with staff recommendations?
Yes.
Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 6, 113 Monroe Street, Fort Conde Restoration Subdivision, recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 7, 3235 Riverview Point Drive, Riverview Farm Estate subdivision, recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Yes. Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Item number 8, 9540 Dolphin Island Parkway, Eli Estate subdivision, recommended for approval. Applicant present. Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Item number 9, west side of Dawes Lane Extension, south of Dawes Creek Drive, the Preserve subdivision Phase 3, recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present?
I'm sorry, I need to recuse on this application.
Mr. Vallis is recused. Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. That's all our items. That closes our public hearing session. We will now go into deliberation. Starting with our holdovers, item number 1, Bluffs at Cypress Creek subdivision, Phase 2. Recommended for approval by staff with the following conditions. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 2, 4658, 4660 Airport Boulevard, Balloon Park subdivision.
Move to approve based on staff recommendations with the, including the findings of fact for approval letters B, C, D, and F.
Yeah, we're taking the PUD separately from the staff report. Or taking them together.
I only see a PUD.
Okay. Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Item passes. Okay. Item number 3.
Do we need to vote on the planning approval as well?
Okay.
Or that's part of the PUD? Okay, okay.
So as you voted, you are requiring the demolition of the car wash.
Correct.
And I did check the previous PUD just to let you know, and it proposed 57 parking spaces, so that was approved with 57 parking spaces, so there would not be an increase that would require a photometric plan.
Okay. So the car wash is demolished, no photometric plan. Thank you. Item number 3, recommended for holdover until the September 6th meeting. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor for holdover to September 6th on 4300 McLeod Lane?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposes? Item passed. New subdivision applications. Item number 4, 820 Ingleside Drive West, Park Forest Estate subdivision. It's recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Move for approval, subject to staff recommendations.
Second?
Properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Item passes. Item number 5, Downers Grove subdivision, Unit 3, recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second?
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 6, 113 Monroe Street, Fort Condy Restoration Subdivision. Recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve, subject to staff recommendations.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 7, 3235 Riverview Point Drive, Riverview Farm Estate Subdivision. It's recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 8, 9540 Dolphin Island Parkway, Eli Estate Subdivision. Recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 9, west side of Dawes Lane, the Preserve Subdivision, Phase 3. Recommended for tentative approval. This is the one Dallas is recused. Is there a motion?
Move to approve according to staff recommendation.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Item passes. That concludes our deliberation session. Now other business. The call for public hearing to consider a reduction of the subdivision jurisdiction.
Mr. Chairman, if you'd allow, I'd like to take a brief opportunity to explain this request and hopefully answer any questions that you may have.
Okay.
At the request of Mayor Stimson, the planning staff has been asked to explore and evaluate the city's current duties and responsibilities as it relates to subdivision control in the city's extraterritorial planning jurisdiction. So very briefly, I'd like to give you an overview regarding the basis for the city's recommendation. As you all know, Mobile's current planning jurisdiction extends 5 miles beyond the city limits. The overall purpose of the planning jurisdiction is to ensure that in the event of an annexation, that existing development is consistent with the adjacent municipalities' regulations. As recommended in the map for Mobile, the comprehensive growth plan that was adopted a few years back, it prioritizes the notion of focusing the city's limited resources in a way that provides high-quality services and infrastructure within the existing built environment. So to this end, there are no current plans for further annexation. Additionally, while the Mobile Planning Commission may require a higher standard of infrastructure construction within the planning jurisdiction, the effectiveness of these standards are limited as the county does not enforce compliance with these higher standards. So on to what we believe the benefits of the rollback to be. A rollback of the planning jurisdiction affords the city the ability to enhance essential services involving the planning and development review process. A quick evaluation of the number of applications that we review over time revealed that roughly 35% of the subdivision applications that come before the city and this commission are generated in the planning jurisdiction. This significant caseload reduction would reduce the turnaround time impacting development cases within the city review process. And so for us, that reduction allows us to concentrate on applications within the city and hopefully affords us with the ability to expedite our review process. Building permits, just as an additional assurance, the building permits would not be impacted by this change, as the issuance of these permits within the planning jurisdiction come under the authority of Mobile County through their inspections services department. So with that, I'd like to ask Mr. Jim Rossler to go over the legislative authority that we believe allows us to move forward with this action, and also discuss with you what the approval process would be.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Years ago, the Alabama law required that any change in planning jurisdiction be made by the City Council. In 2015, that law changed, and it now provides that the Planning Commission determines its own jurisdiction and is authorized to reduce that jurisdiction, to fully exercise it to the 5 miles, or to reduce it to less than 5 miles. There's only 2 requirements. Well, one administrative and 2 substantive requirements. One, the commission must adopt a resolution to reduce the jurisdiction by October 1st of any year. And if the commission does decide to reduce the jurisdiction, then the reduction would become effective January the 1st. The administrative requirement is that 5 days after the resolution passes, it has to be provided to the county commission. The proposal before you is to reduce the extraterritorial jurisdiction all the way back to the city limit line, so that there would not be any subdivision jurisdiction exercised beyond the city limits. The call for public hearing would schedule a public hearing for September 6th, which would allow, if the commission wanted to, one holdover before that October 1 deadline comes up. I think it could either be voted on September 6th or September 20th at those meetings.
Sound like a pretty big deal to change.
It is.
And bring your lines back in that far. I mean, what?
It is, and that's
we're talking
why
about subdivision is what we're talking about. PUD and zoning, that doesn't apply, but.
just subdivision applications.
Right. So if this is pulled back, just clarification, I mean, the county has jurisdiction, would have jurisdiction at that point in time.
Yes.
But the county really doesn't have any guidelines for subdivision requirements other than floodwater retention.
I think that those more familiar with it might be able to answer that question, but I understand that the county does have subdivision regulations in effect that apply outside of this commission's jurisdiction. So if this commission voted to bring it back to the city limit line, no action would be required by the county commission. Their sub-regulations would immediately apply in that area.
I guess we need to get clarification on what the county requirements are to know what kind of a monster we're creating out in the county, just right outside the city limits lines. I mean, just to make sure that we're not hurting ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Has the county commission been, have y'all talked with them at all? Have they weighed in on this, the county commissioners?
No. Moving forward from this process, the next step would be to reach out to them to give them an opportunity to weigh in during that public hearing process. And we will, as a result of this meeting, we'll be notifying them that such a public hearing will be scheduled and it will be taking place at your next meeting.
And how will the public be notified of the public hearing? Will there be specific issues within the, or specific ways of targeting the public in the planning jurisdiction?
We would advertise as we normally would, following our requirements for advertisement.
But it will be advertised twice. As we looked at it and talking to Mr. Anderson, we couldn't find a requirement for a public hearing on something like this, but we decided it's a pretty big issue. Let's go ahead and ask the commission to hold a public hearing on it and provide the notification. But yes, if you call for the public hearing, a notification will immediately go out to the county commission to advise them of the public hearing date.
What would the timeline be as far as, I mean, this needs to be done before October 1st, so what would the timeline look like?
Timeline, public hearing on September 6th, could either be voted on that date or if held over on September 20th. And if the resolution is adopted by October 1, then everything stays status quo until January 1st, when the jurisdiction would, the change in jurisdiction would become effective. That's all by statute.
And this does not have to be taken to the city council?
It does not.
Any other questions from commissioners?
Thank y'all.
Is there anything that we need to take action on at the moment?
Yes, we would need the motion for the call for the public hearing.
Okay. Like a motion, is there a motion for a call for a public hearing on the reduction of the planning jurisdiction?
So moved.
Properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Public hearing can be scheduled. September the 6th.
Staff would, I mean, I know y'all gonna reach out to the county commission at this point, but could we request that one or two or three of the county commissioners be here to?
They'll be invited.
Okay, okay. Okay, all right. I think that's very important. Because as long as we have some standards, you know, if we pull back our jurisdiction, as long as there's some standards that are in place that the county has, then okay. And we just know what those standards are.
If I read the handout that you gave us, if I read it correctly, and from what Mr. Rossler said, there are standards, the city has higher standards, and the county does not enforce them. Is that correct?
Correct, yes. They have their very own subdivision regulations
And that's what they
within.
enforce,
Correct.
not necessarily ours. Okay.
And just to further clarify the concerns regarding the built environment, they have their own procedures for issuance of building permits.
Okay.
And
Next
those permits, that issuance is in place right now, so it would carry forward through this, if this change were to take effect.
Next item on the agenda is 82 Max Street. Discussion clarification of conditions for tentative approval.
Mr. Chairman, essentially what occurred is this subdivision, the preliminary plat shows a 20-foot setback along Max Street. In the staff report, the staff brought up that that was requested, but that there was no justification provided for that 20-foot setback rather than 25. The comment was then inserted in the report that the 25-foot setback should be retained, and that was then in the recommendations of conditions. The applicant, in reading the recommended conditions, when it said retain setback, they thought that that was 25 feet because that is what was shown on their preliminary plat. 20 feet is what was shown on their preliminary plat. So when they saw the word retain, they thought they were able to retain 20 feet. It reads 25 feet in the letter of decision. Their proposed building is proposed up to that 20-foot line, which would comply with zoning, but not with the subdivision regulations if that setback is at 25 feet. So the question or clarification for the commission is the setback for the plat along Max to be 20 or 25.
So we're just asking for a clarification, or do we need to make a motion to clarify, or?
You would need to make a motion and clarify if it is different, if it is going to be 20 feet along Max as shown in the letter of decision, or excuse me, 25. We need to know if it's 20 or 25 feet along Max.
It says 25, and they're requesting 20.
Yes, sir, and like I said, it was all the confusion, other than my messing it up here, the confusion within the report and the recommendations in the letter of decision revolves around that word retain. Staff meant it in terms of the subdivision regulations, retaining the setback as stipulated in the subregs. The applicant and agent took retain in reference to the preliminary plat and what was shown on it.
As a practical matter, may I ask a question? Is that appropriate for me to ask a question? As a practical matter, have they begun construction or done anything to that setback line?
Well, yeah, I put the 20 because it is allowed in the zoning, but, sorry. I prepared this. This is a site plan that they had prepared based on the 20-foot. Because the yellow is the building that they're planning on doing, and 20 feet right at that corner, you're only affecting 25 square feet or something about like that, I think, of that building. It's just that point would be 20 feet from the right-of-way line. The rest of the building is well clear of the 25-foot. So it wouldn't be really hurting any owner across the street.
So have they begun any construction?
Ma'am?
Have they begun any construction?
No.
The plans have been submitted.
Yeah. Yeah, the site plan had been submitted, and that's where it came up.
Okay.
He had drawn it 20 and said it was 25.
No, ma'am, there was not. The only question that was brought up is Mathers. A portion of it has been vacated, and that was the only question as to whether or not the setback would extend in that direction. But I think Mr. Byrd would say that the reason why it wasn't questioned along Max is because of the word retain was in that recommended condition. But then the number, of course, was 25 in the staff recommendation.
So yeah, both the staff recommendation and the letter of decision both clearly state retention of the 25-foot setback.
That's correct, but when staff says retain, they meant in relation to the subdivision regulation requirements. The applicant took retain as it related to the preliminary plat that was submitted.
So they didn't read it correctly, it seems? Okay. Do we need a motion?
Correct.
So I have a question. If it's, if the 20-foot is granted, is he, does he have to build according to the plan submitted? If you're granted the 20-foot and you show that there's only this one little corner where it makes a difference, are you committed? Can we make you committed to that?
Yeah, so you're not going to
If you want to.
adjust
change
it so
it.
that the whole building is right on the 20-foot setback, right?
Right.
Like, Is he,
The plans making it around, that would actually make the plan more difficult to put the entire alignment of the building along that.
is he tied to as presented in terms of where the building is on the site?
No, this is not site plan specific, it's simply the setbacks.
Okay.
Mr. Bird, the plans that y'all have submitted are already showing, that basically they show a 20-foot setback, correct? Right, so we're just trying to basically give the green light to let you do what you've already submitted your plans to do, which would be item number 4, I think it is. Right. 4. I think it's 4. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You've already submitted the plan, so everything is, it's set in stone. So we're just giving that extra 5 feet is really not that much of an issue, I wouldn't expect.
Just that 5 feet.
We have, on occasion, made an exception for a portion of the setback. I think we had a overhang that jutted out of the
Right.
setback, and we just gave them a little carve-out.
At the gas station, yeah, on Highway 90.
It's down at Tillman's Corner,
Right.
Yeah.
front on Halls Mill Road.
Can we do that with this? Can we make this?
Well, I didn't do it, but I was here. I think he dropped it down to 15 feet there.
Can we hear from the staff on what their thoughts are?
Basically, we consider this a clarification. The staff in the report and recommendation meant one thing, and that was retain the setbacks as outlined in the subdivision regulations. The applicant felt retain was the setbacks that they provided on their preliminary plat.
Which was 20 feet.
The commission has the ability to alter that side yard setback along Max to 20 feet because it does comply with the zoning ordinance requirements.
I'll make a motion that we clarify the item number 4 on the letter of decision, retention of 25 to change it to retention of 20, minimum building setback on Max Street.
Was that 20 foot? I couldn't hear.
Yeah, 20
There's
feet.
a motion for 20-foot.
I second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. It is amended to 20-foot along Max Street. Is there anything else? Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Carlos.